Kia ora and welcome to everyone for this last Under the Hood of 2023. It's great to see all of you online from around Aotearoa. And we've got two great speakers today. From Isthmus, we have Nada Stanish, and from Maynard, we have Emme Jacob. So before we start, I'll just go through a few general design assembly slides in terms of kind of what's coming up before the end of the year as well that you might like to get involved with. I can go through my slides. So yeah, a lot of you are in here today as DA Friend members, and as part of your membership, you get to attend these Under the Hood online events throughout the year for as part of your membership. So that's a great reason to jump on board as an individual member or a studio member, and you can watch these live, and then you'll also be sent the link to watch on demand later. So as I mentioned, we have Emme and Nada speaking today, and the theme is around design and placemaking, which is an extension of our spring conversations that we held in person. And yeah, we've been carrying on that theme in terms of articles and showing projects, and we'll have a podcast as well, and kind of wrapping it up with this online event. So if you have any questions for each speaker, then if you can pop those in the Q&A, and after the first speaker, we'll pause for a Q&A with Nada, and then Emme will be second, and we'll have a Q&A with her following her presentation. So we still have a few things coming up before the end of the year, and here's a few of them. So there is brunch by the beach in Tamaki Makaurau with our partners Rocket Spark. So this will be a really great event, especially for freelance designers. And you'll hear from a keynote speaker, and there'll be a panel discussion, and also network with a lot of other freelance designers. And then we have two workshops, one in Poneke and one in Tamaki Makaurau. So check out more details for those. And we'll also have a summer social coming up around the 30th of November or close to that in the three main cities as well. So yeah, lots to get on board with, and lots of reason to become a DA Friend member today. So welcome to Nada. If you'd like to unmute yourself. Go. Hello, how are you? How are you going?
I'm good, thank you very much. I had a little bit of a rush to get in here this morning, but I'm all settled in now. So yeah,
fantastic.
Ready to go.
Great. Well, it's lovely to have you here today with us, presenting a project that you've worked on with Isthmus, your studio. Yeah. So I'll hand over to you and let you introduce yourself, and then get stuck into your presentation. And as I said, if you have questions, feel free to pop those in the Q&A, and then I'll pop back at the end, and we'll have a bit of kōrero with Nada. Thanks, Nada. You can see that share screen down the bottom there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just get it on to full screen. So tēnā koe, everybody. I'm Nada Stanish, and I'm a principal landscape architect at Isthmus Group. And I guess starting off with the premise of this talk in terms of place, I wanted to specifically talk about relationship, both for myself and then also in terms of the client with the particular project that I'm talking about. So this is me on the right at the end, probably about 1972, with my sisters and a few of our mates, and we're just sitting out front of the house that I grew up in Ponsonby. And I guess my trajectory into landscape architecture kind of took an interesting route. I really was I studied in fine arts, and then there was a series of other things that I did before I got to doing my landscape architecture degree. And I guess my upbringing was informed by having an architect father and a mum who was a painter. So I was sort of pretty immersed in sort of creative environment. I think to segue into the project, the cool thing about this image is that I'm sitting on a basalt stone curb, and it's most likely that this basalt came from the Mangawhau volcanic cone, which is the project that I'm talking about today. And I thought it'd be a nice segue in terms of relationship, because I think I grew up in the context of this landscape, which is you know, populated by quite a few volcanic cones, and of course they have a significant place in terms of mana whenua in Tamaki. So I'll just move on to my intro sheet, which is this project came to me, I guess. I feel a bit like it was gifted to me by a colleague in my studio, who at the time when it came in was unable to do it himself. So I'm sort of forever grateful for that. In doing this talk, I just want to acknowledge where we are and acknowledge the client, Tupuna Maunga Authority, and the Tupuna Maunga Trust. And just, I guess, locate this in the landscape of Mataho. So, yes, I guess in terms of brief and client, from the outset of this project, you know, there was an understanding that the Mangawhau as the ancestral place of mana whenua, or several mana whenua, was the sort of primary client. The client in terms of the project obviously was the Tupuna Maunga Authority. And then, you know, sitting in behind them are the three different raupu that make up the mana whenua connected to this site and to the other 14 sites. And this maps, I guess, sets out those 14 volcanic cones that were in 2014 given back to mana whenua as part of a redress. The other client, obviously, to the project is all the visitors to Mangawhau. So with the brief, I guess the key things for us, I've also got a website there, just because I think if anyone's really interested in what the Tupuna Maunga Authority are doing, you should visit the website, because it's got a lot of stuff there explaining that I can't sort of put into words myself. But anyway, so the brief was really around designing to improve the visitor experience on Mangawhau. In their words, align with our values to restore and protect the maunga. It was critical in the long term to be uplifting the biodiversity. A key thing throughout the whole process, in terms of right through to the build, was treading lightly. And I guess one of the things that we had to address quite quickly in coming into the project was the look and feel of this new boardwalk that was going onto the site. Just in terms of context, I guess I have a few sort of issues with the premise around placemaking, because I feel like this place was sort of made before we entered into the project, and I guess this is just tracking a kind of, I've sort of in a summary kind of pulled together a few aspects of the history of this site. Predominantly, you know, it was the largest citadel and pass site in Tamaki. The first image is an archaeological plan which describes the level of complexity in terms of how the site was inhabited. Even prior to that, the middle image is the landscape, the ancestral landscape of Mataho, which includes a lot more clones than the 14 that were in the redress. And this image, I guess, shows the volcanic flows of lava which we're sitting over. I guess the one of the most impactful parts of the history is from colonization, where the Maunga was, from the turn of the 20th century, quarried quite extensively. There were buildings. The radio communications building was sited up there. There's an underground water reservoir, a trig station, and then also the road. So this is the project sort of has inherited this, I guess, and it was trying to reverse the impact of these things on the site. Site challenges, I guess. There was a lot of site challenges, and the ones that I'm going to talk to the most are around the dealing with grade and the climb from the entry point into the walkway to the top to here is about 30 meters. So that's sort of like a 10 to 12 story building. Alignment, so working within the significant features on the site. The height from ground, so we were having to deal with a whole lot of standards around, fall from height, etc. Accessibility, being able to keep the site open to a degree for a range of disability and other sorts of user groups. Influencing movement patterns, so trying to keep people on the path rather than the current thing of sort of walking all over the place and tracking all over the place. Visibility in terms of the consenting, which is the critical view shafts that we have to adhere to as part of the district plan. And then also the ground, what we're dealing with is essentially a scoria cone. So there's not a lot of give, probably in up around the tihi, a limit of around 200 mil of topsoil. So I guess there was a staging in the project. So the first stage is the stage that I'm primarily going to talk to. And that's really because that was sort of, I guess, setting the tone and the direction for the project going forward. And it was really around addressing, the structure, how it landed, the alignment, all of those factors. There's a lot of other aspects to this project that are really equally important, and one of those is, I guess, the planting. But I feel that I'm not sort of going into a huge cross depth of the project, and I think that we had Uru Whakaaro involved in the planting aspect, and that would be really great to talk to in another conversation. So stage 1 started in around 2019, and stage 2 has just been completed recently. The state of the site from these images, I guess the key things that really the tupuna maunga were wanting to address was the level of impact of people. This site gets around 1 million people a year or more. So and then historically, there was cattle up there grazing. So there's been that sort of impact. People cycling over, very important features on the site, all sorts of levels of impact. And this just describes, I guess, the range of impact that's occurred on site, including the structures. So we're going from the sort of just from the walking visitors over the site on these kind of images at the top, and then down to the trig, the concrete steps that covered at the Apatihi, the former radio communications station, and then the roading. So all of these things have sort of impacted, I guess, in the long term, the sort of mana of the site. So my entry into this was, and I sort of usually work quite intuitively from the beginning. This drawing probably had been done before or around the time that I was entered into the project. And it was really me sort of trying to capture the kind of essentials of what I thought this project was going to be about, given, you know, I sort of understood the site. I'd been up there a lot in my life. So the things that I'm sort of unpacking here in the drawings, this is part of my way of working, really, is to just draw through the design. And I don't really into CAD that much, so I need a lot of support in that regard. So I guess this drawing is really talking about the form and of the maunga, and then the line of the walkway. And this white overlay is probably in a more advanced version because it includes the 2 stages. But there are iterations of this plan, and what I was looking at here is the sort of positive and negatives of the space in terms of the rua and the tua papa. And obviously, you know, the key strategies that I took from this right from the beginning were form, responding to the site, countering the weight of the site with the light of the structure that we were building, the sort of graphic of it, how it would read on the site, and what the build system was. So in the beginning of stage 1, we had an alignment that was provided as a sort of chainage, and we also had a sort of a series of cross sections which provided a kind of safe and, I guess, applying, you know, rigorous in terms of standards, a way to treat the stairway and platform elements. And at this point, we were brought in to sort of, I guess, find the nuances in the design and look at the materiality and you know, the alignment in general. And so I've got a couple of images here. One shows you know, where we started to, but we were really looking at trying to read the levels and the climbs in terms of the terracing platforms, and how could the structure or the walkway kind of respond to that. And then there's also a thing around the width. So initially there was a conversation around the whole walkway being 2 meters, and so I guess on this first site visit, we really looked at what was actually happening on site, and that the fact that some of these walkways were sort of like goat tracks, and we wanted to sort of keep as much as we could to that experience of you know, being quite exposed and on the edge of this crater. So I've just listed there the factors in terms of the ascent and descent, working within the existing track alignment, but trying to find the sort of nuances. And I guess the other thing that comes into it is the materiality and the permeability of the structure. Very early on in the project, before I entered into it, but Isthmus had been involved in some of the benchmarking. So that was really looking at structures in different places around the world on significant sites. And prior to coming into it, there had already been a decision made around using a no-dig pile for the base structure, and this is a reversible sort of technique. So this system can be removed at some point in the future. And I guess the things that I was looking at here were, I guess, the line of the balustrade, how that read in terms of visibility, and then the idea that this line sort of stitched the ground to the sky in a way, or that sense of elevation that you get from moving up. I wanted that sort of repeated pattern, and I worked with a few ideas around it leaning into the cone and also being these angled sort of uprights, which ended up sort of being a little bit complicated, and we decided to return to a more vertical sort of approach, and then but still have the balustrade leaning out into the crater, and also sort of in a way mimicking the I guess the steepness of the internal crater. the materiality aspect of it. So initially the structure was intended to be a sort of galvanized steel structure, and then predominantly with timber boardwalk. And I think at that time the timber was about 50 mil thick or 40 mil thick or something. So we straight away looked at sort of trying to reduce the thickness of the timber, and then also I guess the galvanized had a sort of a starkness and a quality about it that I felt like with the light that you're dealing with up on the maunga, that at certain times it would really become quite visible when the light was hitting it. So we started to look at, what the paint system could be, and changing the color of it so that the graphic was much more in keeping with the site. And then also we started to look at the idea of a permeable mesh, so that over sections of the route, there was a lot of permeability, and the feeling of lightness, and the fact that things could grow underneath, which is actually happening at the moment, which is pretty cool. The piece of work, I guess, that took me the longest to start on and I felt the most nervous about was the northern tihi, because of obviously the visibility of it and the significance of it. So this is the lower tihi to the north as part of stage 1, and I guess the image to the left just shows at this point what was being thought about in terms of a route that you could walk around on that tihi. So with that in mind, I went up to site, and I had a really good look at what was actually happening on the ground, including, drawing out the contours. And it was really sort of picking up on where there were sort of mounds, where there were depressions, where there were pits, and then trying to start to think about the platform, as responding to that. I did attempt to draw the version as per the chainage version, but as you can see, it sort of crosses areas that I felt needed to be read better. So there's a sequence there of different options that we tested, and then we landed on this kind of, at the time it reminded me a little bit of a handbrake, but and I got that stuck in my mind a little bit, but I've managed to get past that. But I think essentially it was, privileging the northern part of the platform, because that would be the place where most people would collect, and then having these sort of edges that responded, and these here we changed the dimension of the timber just to be able to read that sort of earthwork underneath. And we also brought mesh into an area that was around a raised sort of little bit of hill that was there. So it was really trying to respond to what was there on site. And then this is just a view, I guess, of a completed stage 1. And again, it's just expressing this thing of amplifying the maunga and the key strategies, which were form, responsiveness, and countering the weight with a light structure, and then obviously the build system. And that's a view looking north. So you can see where the change in materiality here with the mesh has actually become quite recessive, whereas with the previous image, the platform is light and reflective, and it's on a sort of an elevated site. So those two materiality choices were quite critical. Completing the route. So this is a plan that sort of outlines the full journey around from the entry point at stage 1, which is at the partway up the road, which is now closed. And we enter in again stage 2 at the point of where the radio station building was, which was actually a site that was, or an area that people gravitated to because it was an elevated place that people could sit. So we sort of knew at that point that that a platform there would be good. The building was getting removed, and it's also got a few trees, so it sort of was providing shade. All in all, there's about 8 platforms. So you journey up to the eastern side of the top tihi, which is here. There's a series of platforms over what was very, I guess, damaged area through here, up onto the top tihi, and then down onto this area here, which has been changed from all car parking to a sort of a kind of welcoming area, a raised gravel welcoming area, which has an accessible route around it for wheelchair. So these sketches are really showing, I mean, there was a lot of learnings from stage 1 around, you know, working with the contour. We for the second stage, we got another set of survey via drone, because what we found with the first stage is that the survey that we hadn't got the detail that we needed, and there was a few things on site that caused problems in terms of heights. So these drawings are sort of building on that pattern and that learning from the previous work. And these are just a few images showing the sequencing of the platforms. And I guess what I'm showing here is that we're moving from stage 1, which was primarily a sort of a line along the edge of the crater and the saddle of the crater, which is which is sort of the most landscape, up into this area, which was the most built at the top tihi. So there was a lot more hard surface, a lot more structure to remove, but there's also a lot more structure being added, but in a sort of different way, and you know, in comparison to stage 1. And what we were doing really was trying to attend to all the locations that people were drawn to in terms of the platforms. Yeah. So just touching on those other aspects, which is probably a whole other talk, integral, but what became very strongly part of stage 2 was planting, and working with Uru Whakaaro on the planting and implementation of planting. So that was following very keenly their process and their thinking around addressing the biodiversity and the ecology on the site. Also, into the structure, we introduced signage, which is part of controlling the movement patterns of people. And so being able to bring te reo into the actual structure was quite important, because I guess it's around signaling behaviour change and a relationship change to the maunga. And then also the other key piece was reintroducing volcanic rock that had been quarried from Mongafove, partly for the Mount Eden prison. So this was repatriated, and that was one of the key things that the Tupuna Maunga Authority wanted to happen. So all that stone has been stored at one of the other sites, Mātukutururu. So we were able to go there. These stones here are from the actual prison, probably lintels, and we turned them into seats as a way of, you know, reuse. I guess as part of my question answer thing in the article that went out last week, what I did say was, you know, the importance of the team and who you're working with is critical, and it's not just me. There's a bunch of people working with me, and through the stages, I had 3 really exceptional landscape architects working alongside me from stage 1 right through to the build of stage 2, and I'm really grateful of their input. And just listed on the side here is some of the other members from the team involved in visualizations and planning and other aspects of the project that happen in the background. And also the key collaborators, Uru Whakaaro, Stella Projects, HEB, the archaeologist, Renature, TMA, Matt Glanfield, and I think that's near the end of my talk. I just wanted to say, I guess at the end, really what a privilege it has been to work on this project alongside this particular client. Thank you. I think I'm done. Did I go over time?
Thank you so much, Nada. That was, you can stop sharing your screen now if you'd like to. It was so lovely to have the insights into that project, personally, as someone who's lived in Tamaki Makaurau all my life.
Yep.
So I think it's, yeah, I love seeing these maunga being returned to how they were and should be. How important is it to you to work on, kind of in those early stages, to work on paper in those non-digital ways, do you think?
I think yeah, I mean, it's sort of what I do. So I think what it attends to is the sort of level of observation and that you have to make when you're hand drawing, and that sort of relationship between the hand drawing and what's in your head. I think that you know, working digitally can kind of quickly move you away from that. I mean, there's a lot of research and evidence around, you know, the benefits of drawing within our particular discipline. And I think it just helps me to sort of slow down and test things and make a mess and make wrong decisions, or you know, rather than sort of getting locked in quite quickly into the solving the problem in a sort of in a kind of AutoCAD sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, lovely. We have some questions from the attendees. So one person would like to ask, why was the decision made not to have a shelter above the main platform area?
On the top tihi, I think that the thing is that we were working with very strict guidelines around height. So any structure above a certain height, you know, becomes a problem. And in terms of view shafts, which are critical around the city, back to the maunga, there was never a question of putting another building up there. There are buildings up there currently that are lower down on the maunga, and they sort of nestled in and they're not visual. And in fact, on the top tihi, in the future, the trig will probably be removed and yeah, replaced with potentially an artwork.
And are there plans for similar projects on other maunga in Tamaki Makaurau?
Well, yeah, I think if people go onto the website, there's projects happening. There's been work done on Mangere. There's been work done on Maungarei, Takuranga, and I'm not sure if Mahuika, but there's a whole bunch of projects that are going on sort of concurrently. Yeah.
Right. And is Isthmus involved in any of those?
Not currently. We certainly like to be. I think that this project definitely I guess the kit set, the build system that we're using, and the look and the feel of that has been, I guess, picked up through the other maunga projects, working with other designers. So it's had a good role in sort of influencing that.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask Nada before we move on to the second presentation? Well, thank you so much, Nada. It was just a lovely project and lovely to see those insights and behind your process for the project as well. So really appreciate your time and showcasing and bringing that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for everyone came to listen.
Cool. All right. Well, if you'd like to turn off your audio and video,
Yep.
and introduce our second speaker, or Emme will introduce herself. So Emme Jacob is a designer at Maynard. Kia ora, Emme.
Kia ora, thanks so much. That was just beautiful work. It's just like really inspiring and really awesome to be part of these talks, which are quite multidisciplinary. I think it's always really great as a wayfinding designer with a graphic background to see such like rigor go into these landscape projects is really awesome.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I'll ask you to share your screen.
Yes.
And so if you have questions, if you have the answers to, put those in for the Q&A, and I'll pop back at the end of Emme's presentation.
Awesome. Cool. I hope that's showing full screen. So yeah, kia ora, I'm Emme. I'm a wayfinding designer, which is kind of just a fancy way of saying I really like signs. I really like to make sure that they work really hard for people and kind of contribute to a spatial experience. And it was really great, by the way, to see where you're all from. So thank you so much for joining. And today I'll be presenting this piece of work, Te Mata Wai, which has only very recently wrapped up. So it's quite exciting to share this with you all today. I've had to do a lot of reflection on the kind of journey we've been through on this project, and to see it realized only in the last couple months and be able to share it with you today is really awesome. So yeah, I'll take you through kind of like what our brief was. So Te Mata Wai is a kāinga ora site. So kāinga ora provide kind of social housing developments across the country. And does it say my screen sharing is paused? Can anyone see my screen? Hang on a moment. Okay. Can everyone see the screen? Okay, I'm not sure, but I'm going to plow on. So kāinga ora, yeah, they provide.
Yes, we can see it. We can see it, Emme. Okay.
I might just leave it in this view just in case. But yeah, so kāinga ora provides social housing across the country, and they were doing this site at Grays Avenue, which is kind of in the heart of Tamaki Makaurau. And it was a real first for them to kind of design and provide something of this scale. There's a whole list of things down the side, 200 state homes, private homes, 3 buildings, an abundance of kind of community facilities and services, among other kind of locations. But the real thing that all of these things encapsulates is the fact that they were designing a community, a space where people will call this their home, their kāinga, and to be able to design wayfinding for that was very different from other wayfinding projects I'd done to date. And often, with projects like this and projects with kāinga ora, they had such a close collaboration with Ngāti Whātua Orake, as, the site is really historically significant to local Māori, and being where Waihora-Tiu, the historic stream once ran, that kind of became the guiding narrative to inform a lot of the design outcomes. And for any Isthmus people in the digital space, you might recognize some images on the screen. And Isthmus were actually a design partner on this, as well as Mode Architecture. And it's quite interesting as a wayfinding designer, we sometimes get brought on quite late in the piece and in the kind of design story. And what's really cool about that is we get to see how other design teams have approached a gifted narrative. And, the storytelling of Waihora-Tiu can be told in many ways, and it's appropriate to tell in many ways depending on the location of the site. So we had Isthmus, who were responsible for the landscape, approach, the narrative in their own way. And then we had Mode, the architecture company, have their approach to the kind of external facade, which was telling a particular story. And then on the inside of the building, kind of referencing, you know, New Zealand wildlife, New Zealand birds. And for us in our brief of doing wayfinding, you know, wayfinding is kind of that piece that actually turns up everywhere. You know, it's like it will be out there in the landscape with, you know, what Isthmus has done, and it will be in and amongst all of the architecture, the artworks and all the materials that are happening in the space. So for us, it was kind of like, okay, how can we approach the narrative of Waihora in our own way, whilst acknowledging kind of the other team's approach as well. I guess before getting straight into the kind of design outcome, a really key part of our process is understanding the space, and obviously those who will use the space and call the space home. And with the idea of home as the outset, it kind of changes some of our like natural approaches to wayfinding, where you know, wayfinding typically we can be wanting to be really overt and like really stand out in the environment and really cut through. But instead, you know, when thinking about color strategy, it was about kind of drawing a relationship to nature, or that historic nature that was once there, and really understanding how stimulating we want the environment to be. You know, the site being in the heart of the city has a lot of stimulation around it. And what we wanted this home to be was to be really peaceful and really calm. And I think colour is a really important part of that kind of task. And then the final kind of element to colour is colour association. And if you think back to the image of the building, it's kind of 3 adjoining buildings which have levels that do connect and levels that don't. And so as an unfamiliar user, you could find yourself walking into, you know, the entrance or down a hallway, and the whole thing feels like one building. But actually there are kind of quiet transition points when you technically move from one building to another. And to understand that transition is really important, because you need to make sure that if you're going up, you know, up the lifts, that you're in the right building. So associating colour with those 3 buildings was really key. And an interesting insight we kind of gathered through stakeholder engagement with Kāinga Ora was this desire to ensure that the system was for everyone. And through that was kind of acknowledging the varying like literacy levels or language levels of people who may live there. And with that in mind, the system we kind of came to was very visual led, where like visually descriptive pictograms becomes the hierarchy, supported by kind of bilingual content throughout. And as I kind of mentioned before, you know, being such a diverse and like visually interesting experience in space, wayfinding needed to be the kind of the constant, something that you can kind of learn to rely on as you kind of enjoy that environment. And so when thinking about the wayfinding requirements for this space, a few of these are obviously like quite, you know, obvious, you know, clear wayfinding, accessible and healthy routes, of course. But a real interesting part of this was actually realizing that the space was actually less about directing people around. Because if you think about like your own home and where you live, you know how to get around your own home. You know, you don't need to be overtly told which way is which. But instead, what we wanted to do is give hierarchy and prominence to identification signage. So what's really cool about Te Mata Wai is the abundance of kind of community spaces, facilities and services that are on offer. And we wanted to bring that to the forefront so that as you maybe just like walking down to your lift, you're kind of constantly reminded of all these spaces that are for you, and to kind of encourage that engagement and connection within that community. And so sorry if this is really tiny for anyone on their screens, but being, quite a large and diverse site in terms of the various offerings that there are, this kind of zoning strategy helps us apply how kind of subtle or overt signage needs to be, and why. So, we've got public communal spaces, which are spaces that anyone from the public can kind of enter, engage with. You may be invited to a multi-purpose space for an event. And for spaces like that, you may need to be more overt. And then when you start thinking about the residential spaces, that's where you can be really subtle, because that's just about kind of supporting the experience and keeping things really kind of calm and level and not over-signing. And this is kind of where I start getting excited about the kind of transition between wayfinding strategy and a kind of design outcome, is taking all that learnings from the strategy and actually applying, okay, well, what does this actually mean for people and for the people who will live here? And these statements kind of help guide us through kind of design development and kind of keep us grounded in like what we're doing this for and why. So what it means for people, this is kind of what we determined it meant, wayfinding. Wayfinding helps my home actually feel like one. It contributes to kind of a feeling of a calm escape. And it also, encourages confidence. If you may have English and Te Reo Māori as your second and third languages, you still feel like you're able to find your way around and engage with the community spaces on offer. So translating that into design, this was how we approached the narrative of Waihorotū, which was the guiding waters of Waihorotū. So inspired by the many tributaries that form the stream, the concept represents kind of a fluidity, a gathering together of people, and kind of forming a calm and guiding experience. And our way of kind of connecting the physical Waihorotū, the stream itself, with a lot of the other narratives happening on site, was to think about the Waihorotū as a source of life and kind of providing the nutrients that supports the kind of native bush and the bird life above, all the while kind of grounding this idea with a feeling of home. And so this is like quite a personal approach to like mood boards, I guess, in that I really am personally quite inspired by things outside of the thing I'm actually doing. So if I'm doing wayfinding, that's kind of like the last thing I'm going to look at, and even graphic design as well. And I'm personally really inspired by, Te Nada's sentiments, just the world around us, but also really inspired by art, architecture, product, furniture, photography. And this was kind of my way of guiding the outcome and making sure that it was kind of responding to the needs of the users. So shout out for the people who own these images. Some really beautiful artwork in here by Israel Birch, Nina Van Leer Design Works, and David St. George. So thank you for the beautiful images. So to speak again about kind of how the Waihorotū is that source of life and how we can now start to tangibly take that idea into a design outcome. We've got the kind of the Waihorotū stream, which gives reference to that form and that kind of graphic language of the fluidity. And then we have our forest floor, which kind of informs the form and the texture. And then finally, we have the canopy, so the life above, and that inspires color and material. And this is how we started to weave together that idea through the wayfinding. And this is how it starts to kind of piece together. And it's a really collaborative effort between kind of strategy, graphic, and product to kind of all to come together to tell the same story. And we knew that, you know, the use of kind of like timber would be a really strong point to reference the kind of natural and historic environment. And we're really interested in how we could kind of combine timber with a sense of fluidity when those two items don't necessarily naturally go hand in hand. And then how that idea could be supported, you know, graphically through hints of fluidity, whilst also remaining like abundantly clear of, you know, what this place is and what it is for. And with regards to timber, we actually had this almost amazing idea of repurposing a rimu staircase from the building that was knocked down to make way for this new site. Through talking with Kāinga Ora, you know, we had like collectively agreed we really wanted to use native timber, and thankfully they just let us into kind of the downstairs basement to rummage around, and there was an amazing amount of this rimu staircase, and we were so desperate to make it work, and we were kind of even thinking like, how can we use the size of the staircase to inform kind of what signs we can create out of it. But unfortunately, it was just riddled with nails and it never became a reality. But I really appreciate the kind of clients and our desire to kind of be sustainable and try and reuse something from the original site. And it can take a lot of effort. And I think if anyone else gets the opportunity to, or if we do, it's something I'll chase again for sure. But thankfully, we did actually get the opportunity to use tōtara in the end, which was really awesome. The prototypes to the left and right were done in rosewood, which were an amazing exercise to see how the routing and some of the design elements would come together. And one important element of this site is actually artwork. And across Te Amata Wai, artwork is a really key part of the story of telling Waihora and kind of also Ngāti Whātua's influence and importance in that area as mana whenua. And we knew we had an opportunity to collaborate on getting some artworks for the wayfinding. And we knew we had about the time and budget for approximately 3 artworks. And as the site has 3 buildings, it could feel really natural to think, okay, well, 3 buildings, 3 artworks, 1 artwork per building, you know, contribute to that sense of like, this is my building, this is my artwork. But then when we gave it a bit more thought, we were kind of like, oh, well, these artworks are so beautiful and so interesting. And if you happen to live in one building, you know, is it a shame that you only get to kind of interact with one? And so instead, we kind of commissioned an amazing artist, Katz Mahi, to do some artworks that kind of respond to the meaning of wayfinding in this place. So on the left here, you have Manu. And when we go right back to kind of understanding the interior approach for the building, you know, the interior design has kind of personified levels with New Zealand birds. So we could kind of lean into that and reinforce that by incorporating Manu artwork into the kind of level identification. And there's also just like a nice feeling of like, this is my home, this is my nest. Plus you're in the upper levels of that building, which kind of speaks to being up in the canopy as well. And then our middle artwork we have here is Y. And this is used on all kind of directional and directory signage, symbolizing movement and kind of guiding your way around the space. And then finally, on the image on the right is harakeke, and this is kind of showing the weaving together of flax. And this is used on signs that identify community spaces and services, as a way of kind of acknowledging that coming together of people. So to wrap into the just outcome images, like I said, this is all wrapped up very recently. So it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on the work. But yeah, we were really excited to see this kind of become a reality and see how some of the wayfinding decisions complement and contrast the space in a really cool way, I think. And in this image here, you can see this incredible carved desk. It's actually so beautiful in reality. This, photo is great, but the desk is better in real life. And that also uses tōtara and was carved by Katz Mahi and his team. So to kind of tie in with that really key piece of artwork through signage was really awesome. And that's a bit of a closer shot there of kind of how that artwork kind of routes into the kind of fluid form of the wood. And again, kind of giving that real special care to the pictograms themselves by making them really large, putting them kind of in the forefront of this like beautiful piece of timber, and making them really clear. And I also just like personally quite love this image and the texture of the wood. And one thing that's really cool throughout the space is how different the colors of the wood are and the textures and the imperfections, whilst kind of still retaining this legibility, was really cool to see. So yeah, to show those three artworks in reality, we have Katz Mahi, his work for Manu, shown in that upper portion there. And we have Y shown on the directional signage here. You can kind of see too how the pictograms play a really big part in the kind of directional content as well. Instead of just listing everything with words, we kind of use images almost always, I think, across the site. And then finally, harakeke. So any of those large community spaces that bring together people and community kind of have this artwork applied. And one thing we were excited to do, but is a challenge and a good challenge, is bilingual content. And the only reason in which it's a challenge is you just have to keep in mind the timeline for the project and making sure that you provide enough space for what the translation may be. And it's completely achievable and so worthwhile to do. And we actually had tried to push to do bilingual Braille, and it didn't come to fruition. And it's something I'm seeking to find out more about and to understand how that might be used by people and what that might present as. So if anyone has experience in that space, I'd be really keen to know more. And finally, you can kind of see how those building colors have been applied as these wood stains. And also in this image, you can kind of see the variety of material and texture used throughout, and how, although we've leaned into just one material, it's actually really sympathetic to a lot of the materials used throughout. And we kind of have this balance of providing a color with enough contrast, but without trying to be too kind of punchy and vibrant necessarily. And again, like I mentioned before, it was really exciting to actually see the imperfections in the system as well. Being native timber, you know, wood warps, wood comes in all sorts of colors and varieties. And, you know, through the kind of snags and defects process with our sign manufacturer, Sign Effects, they were kind of quite worried that we would come in and say, oh, like, you've got to replace all these signs. But we just kind of leaned into it and thought, well, you know, we tried so hard to repurpose wood that was imperfect to begin with. So why would we waste any imperfections now? And we actually think it kind of furthers that connection to the natural environment and hopefully to a sense of home as well. So just to share a couple pictures kind of behind the scenes, as I mentioned, we worked with Sign Effects on the delivery of the signage, and being a large site, it is a lot of really meticulous labor, and they did an incredible job. It was a lot to coordinate together, but to see them share the same love and care for the outcome as ourselves and with Kāinga Ora, it was a really great team to get this over the line. Another little behind the scenes shot there, they had a specialist woodworker that they collaborated with, and then all the kind of routed and carved wood would come back and they would do all the painting and the detailing, and it came out really great. So yeah, that's me, and that's Te Mata Wai. So thank you so much for listening. I hope it wasn't too rapid fire. But yeah, it was a pleasure to share this with you all. So thank you.
Thanks, Emme. It's awesome to see your process behind this project. If you could stop sharing your screen if you want.
Wait, I need to do one
Cool.
thing.
Okay. Did you?
I brought
Is it
one.
your souvenir? Or you brought one?
I'm also matching, which is great.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, cool. All right, I'm derailing, but over to you.
That's all right. I love how those washes of those colors kind of sit over the kind of the quality of the wood as well, and like you say, like they've got that color but they're not kind of like popping out. They kind of really sit, I think, with that whole color palette. Okay, we've got a few questions. So how did you choose typography and iconography? How did you approach these aspects?
So in the kind of graphic outcome, that's where we really wanted to lean into the kind of fluidity aspect. And we kind of had that in our mind, and also an idea of using wood and being able to route things, route the kind of items. So that kind of informed the pictograms kind of being like a line work, you know, something where it has a consistent kind of drill bit that can go in to create those forms. And then really it was just a deep dive to find typography that has that kind of just like slightly human feeling to it, whilst also being really clear. And sometimes it's a hard balance to find. And there's, you know, no perfect typeface out there. But that's kind of, yeah, where we landed. But it took a lot of digging around to find the right one.
Where was the totara sourced from?
Oh man, I actually do know this. It was oh gosh, it's not oh man, I've forgotten now.
That's all right, you can tell us later.
I will tell you later, but we were really surprised basically that we could get it.
Yeah,
because it's not often that it comes up. And I think we were really restrictive with what signs got the tōtara. You know, we weren't going to do like all your little bits and bobsy signage, like cleaner's closet with tōtara, you know. It's like we actually we were like, okay, we have this like, incredible honor to use this material, and this has to kind of apply to the spaces that matter. But I will come back to you with where it was from, because I have a feeling it was like a grower, like someone like an actual like forestry kind of. It wasn't like a fallen tōtara, I don't believe.
Yeah, and one last question, which is quite a nice way to wrap it up. What books or resources would you recommend for a graphic designer that wants to learn more about wayfinding design and principles?
Ooh, that is a good question. I guess from like a historic point of view, of little Ica, so can I write it in the chat? It's like OTLAICHER, is kind of like granddad of wayfinding in a way. And I think that's a good place to start in terms of understanding where a lot of it has come from. But also, I actually also quite like looking at historic guidelines documents as well. Like a real classic is the like the New York subway system. I have that book at home, and it's fun to see kind of like how people approach the guidelines and strategy of wayfinding. So maybe those would be my two personal favorites.
All right, thank you. That's maybe given me an idea that we could like have a follow-up from these kind of things with like a recommended reading list or something like that. Could be cool.
Yes, definitely, because I have a longer list. I'm just shocked at the names. I could describe the covers, but you know.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through the process behind that project, full of lots of insights. And I really loved when you talked about your almost amazing idea, because I think that's really nice to kind of to share those as part of the process too. So thank you. So you can turn off your video and camera now. So yes, thank you to both our speakers again. I know it takes a lot of time and energy to put these presentations together. And thank you to all of you for attending today. You'll also receive the on-demand link to watch later in your own time. And again, become a DA Friend member if you're not. As you can see, you can get online content as part of your membership. And also we have in-person events in Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch throughout the year. So I look forward to seeing you all at the next DA event or workshop. Thanks very much. Have a good afternoon.